Welcome back to a special edition of the Storm Cellar. Brad and Ray are here. Normally, everybody knows we have a family-friendly podcast. We try and keep it PG. We might stray into PG-13 on social media once in a while, but this episode is definitely not going to be for little ones, kids, etc. So if the little ones are around, now's a good time to hit pause. We're going to be talking about the Chicago Blackhawks cover-up. So we're going to be frank. We're going to speak. Ray and I, want to keep things friendly, but this is such an important topic that I think we need to address this the way it needs to be addressed. Thanks for joining me, Ray. Let's just dive right into it. Perhaps the biggest thing for us to say first is we are completely in support of Kyle Beach. It was incredibly brave for him to come out and not just let this be John Doe 2, because by putting a face on it, I think he's really engaged a set of people who might otherwise have let this continue to slide. I can think of people who were Blackhawks fans who are like, okay, after seeing the interview and listening to his words on the TSN interview, I just can't. It's too much. They've gone too far. It really made a personal connection for folks. We can get into what was said, but I think it's important for all of us to say, Kyle deserves that support. And it's not just Kyle. I think Kyle is a face of something that's been going on anyway, not just in sports. I mean, unfortunately, women deal with this all the time. So I think Kyle's just, it's a different kind of a lens on what's already been a somewhat ubiquitous problem that we need to address. And I think people maybe are starting to finally, take action on things. So what are your initial thoughts, Ray?
Well, right off, again, I want to echo that and just maybe bring it to a finer point. When you put a face and a name, a real name, real face to these types of stories, it's you cannot turn away and pretend it didn't happen. You hear John Doe, Jane Doe, whatever. I look at the young women, the gymnasts who were in Congress and had a chance to, testify and say exactly what was going on. Completely different story than this one, but those women standing up and saying, this happened to us, and sharing that information and that story really brings it to the front. And what Kyle did, unbelievably brave. Because when you look at the report, when you listen to the interview, if it was all just a John Doe and stuff, it would be easy enough for the people who have shuffled this story off and organizations who have shuffled it off and covered it up for more than 10 years. It would be easy to just keep it moving aside, nothing to see here type attitude. And Kyle stepping forth and showing that bravery, he deserves to be commended. We are behind him. And so that's the very first thing I wanted to say, just to echo that. The message that I have for the podcast listeners, this is a very difficult topic. We couldn't possibly encapsulate it properly. The only way that we can do it is to recommend that if you want to find out exactly what the Blackhawks cover-up story is, what it's about, you need to go online and find the Jenner and Block report and or watch the TSN interview with Kyle Beach. I suggest doing both. The report itself, 107 pages long, okay? It goes, the first 68 are the legalese descriptions of everything that had happened over X amount of times. And it's a little difficult to read, not just because of the content, but because there is legalese. Everything is written in the John Doe format. So everyone who is involved in this that they name, most times they name them as John Doe or a confidant of John Doe, and everything. The legalese makes it a little bit clunky to read, but read it, take the time, power through it, and then if you look at the indices, I think that's the proper phrase for it, are all of the appendix items where they have pictures And it just brings everything home. You know what I mean? Like it just makes it very, very poignant. The TSN interview, 26 minutes long. It's a difficult watch because you see and feel Kyle's pain, but he brings it to the front and he explains everything. There's difficult questions, hard answers, but again, you see, and he gives examples of his great bravery and you see how he is as a man, and I was just in awe of him. So strong despite such terrible circumstance. Do both Jenner and Block report and the TSN interview with Kyle Beach. You can do either, but do both. That's my recommendation.
And I'll post links to both of those. I'm with you. If you can get through the report, I would read it. If you don't think you can or you don't have time, at least watch the interview. It's 26 minutes. It's less than a TV show. And if you're like me, and I'm probably speaking for Ray, watching that, I went from being pissed off about what, not just what had happened, but the extent of the cover up. I literally crying. My son was in bed. I was in my chair watching it, crying.
Yeah.
As Kyle Beach is mad at himself for not having done more, which may have prevented what happened to John Doe number 2. And it's like, Kyle's the one person in all this who shouldn't feel that way. Literally everybody else in this should feel that way, and they don't. And so on one hand, I'm upset and I'm mad, on the other end, and there's the emotions are all over the place, because it's just, if you're a decent human being, I don't know how you get up in the morning having known this. I mean, I'm glad Bowman's out. I'm glad Quenneville's out. Cheveldayoff, in my opinion, should be out. His defense, if you can call it a defense, and I don't, is basically, well, I was the new guy in the room, and I just assumed my superiors would handle it. If that isn't the biggest cop-out I've ever heard in my life by anybody, when something's gone wrong, well, I wasn't in charge, so it's not on me. It is on you. You're a human being.
Yep.
Plain and simple, you're a human being. Do something. If your boss doesn't do something about it, put your career on the line, because you'll get another chance, and stop worrying about yourself and put somebody else before you for 5 seconds. And not one person in that Chicago administration did that. Not one.
I get this in a lot of situations. We talk about the difference between an active and passive bystander, and this is where look, I'm getting ahead of myself. Everyone in that group, as far as the management goes and what they did, they all had a responsibility to address a very serious situation that was brought to their attention, and instead of dealing with this, they put their future in the Stanley Cup final first, and they thought, we will deal with this later.
And that's in the report. That's not, just to be clear to everybody, that's not, we think this is what happened. It's in the report.
No, it's absolutely in the report. There's a lot of details in that report, but that's exactly what they did. We are putting this off. We will deal with this later. And it took a harassment incident with an intern later on, much past this situation that Aldrich had with Beach. It took that additional one for them to actually finally do something. And then what they did, and all that they did, was something that is known colloquially as pass the trash. They addressed Aldrich. They said, you have a choice. We can do a full investigation on this and what happened, or you can resign. Which do you want? And instead of being investigated, he said he would resign, and then asked after the fact, just he after he left Chicago, he left his time in Chicago off his resume. Left it off on purpose, clearly. As long as he's not our problem. And it's interesting to note. In the report, we find out that Aldrich had previously spent time at University of Notre Dame. That school refused to assist in the investigation. They did not do anything other than say, yes, he spent time here, and that was it. Now, to me, that feels like it makes me wonder if there wasn't a pass the trash situation there as well. Did this type of behavior happen there and they just moved him along? And I don't want to say you can't accuse anyone of having a non-disclosure agreement or whatever, but it just seems suspicious that in this investigation that they could get all the details from everything else, but getting no help from them.
At least in the U.S. legal system, pleading the fifth and not saying anything cannot be used as an admission of guilt legally, but it doesn't mean that we can't all think it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so, all of the management group, everyone, the coaches in that meeting, it's brought to them. Cheveldayoff, who is he is a minor executive at the time. That is true. And it's interesting when Bettman spoke specifically about him, he made a point of saying, look, it would be easy for me to paint everyone in that room with the same brush and be done with it and punish them summarily that way, right? But he wanted to take each situation on its own before any decisions and stuff. Understand that's an honorable thing. You don't like the idea of painting people with the same brush just because of X or Y or whatever. Because that happens a lot in our life, right? That's where, discrimination happens or whatever. Just because one person doesn't mean that people that are like him are all doing that as well. So he did it individually speaking. The problem is it all boils down to one thing, and you've already said it. He was in the room when the meeting was held. Everyone in that meeting had a responsibility to Kyle. And they dropped the ball. They didn't do it. They passed it on. They covered it up just to get through, and then ignored it for 11 years.
And not only the people in the room, Ray, the NHLPA failed Kyle Beach. The NHL failed Kyle Beach. The Chicago Blackhawks failed. The whole system failed Kyle Beach. I don't have my head in the sand. Hockey has, for a long time, there's been rumors of the hazing and older players, making a rough on younger players and those types of things, which I've never liked, and I've always tried to look out for those things. And this took it in my mind. This changed what I thought I knew about kind of the dark underbelly of hockey into a whole different level in some ways, for good or for bad. None of the things that we've heard rumors of are acceptable behavior. But then the extent to which hockey, as far as the NHL goes, in my opinion, has gone to cover this up is Bettman works for the owners. I'm one of many people who thinks Bettman should step down, but I also understand Bettman is doing his job. He's the one taking the shots because really he works for the owners. He doesn't work for the teams. He doesn't work for the players. His job is to make money for the owners. And they've gone from $50 million franchise fees to $650 million franchise fees. They love him. But what it really tells me, if he keeps his job, is the owners are okay with this insofar as if it's not hurting revenues that bad, why change? We're gonna pretend we didn't see it. We're gonna use plausible deniability and say, thank God we're not the Hawks. But all the organization should be on notice that, maybe it's not a Kyle Beach style situation. Maybe it's other forms of hazing, or cancerous locker rooms and racism, those kind of things. But I unfortunately I feel like it's much more prevalent now that Kyle has come forward, that these things are happening at that level. A lot of the things we used to hear were minor hockey and juniors, and things that they used to call boys will be boys. Boys will be boys isn't a thing. No,
Yeah.
like, if a lot of things that are chalked to boys or be boys is not acceptable behavior. But it used to be, I think, more skewed toward those younger, college age, major juniors, those types of things. But now we're talking about professional athletes, and to wrap back around to the NHLPA, they were saying, oh, well, he was called up, but he hadn't played in an NHL game, and does he fall under our purview or not? And I'm going to go back to my earlier statement of, if you're a human being, it falls under your purview.
Yeah.
If you can't see this and say it's wrong, I have to know what's wrong with you. I literally have to know, what is it that allows you to go about your business knowing this happened, knowing that you could have helped and chose, because it was a choice, chose not to.
I'm going to shuffle the the itinerary of our podcast here just slightly, because that leads into the players' reactions. And there was the Hawks players like Taves, like Kane, like Duncan Keith, all asked questions after the fact, all of them claiming they knew nothing about it, or what they heard was simply rumors. Now, you talked about the old boys club and stuff like that. In going back to the report, okay, back to the report, there were times after they had won the cup and they're going into the next training camp where players on the ice, all fighting for a spot on the roster, chirping Kyle, chirping him for what had happened. And when I say chirping, the example that was stated was, hey, hey, Kyle, or what, they didn't use Kyle, but hey, I hear your boyfriend is missing. I hear your boyfriend's missing. Well, how are you going to play without your boyfriend around? That type of chirping, it doesn't make you a passive bystander. It doesn't make you an active bystander. It makes you a co-conspirator. You are part of the problem. And they use that against Kyle to chirp, get into his head, make his time in the training camp and amongst those players more difficult. And we saw the result. He was picked 11th. Everything about him screamed, this is going to be a great talent. He is going to be able to handle himself. He's going to be able to do great things. And because of this incident and the reaction from teammates after the fact, mentally, it became too much stress. He didn't want to be there. And now he's playing in Europe, but his NHL career was massacred by what happened here in Chicago and how they reacted after the fact and how little they did after the fact to cover, and how they covered it up. So guys like Taves and Kane and Duncan Keith, look, you and I, we were not in that room. We can't say exactly for sure that we know damn well they knew what was going on. But when there's that kind of chirping going on, and you're in a tight-knit group on a team, the word gets around, they knew. They knew
Mhm.
and did nothing. Nothing. It makes me crazy. And guys like uh, Taves, who I had a great deal of respect for, Duncan Keith, a great deal of respect for as players, it's gone. I don't care
Mhm.
what they can do on the ice. I don't care what Taves did for Team Canada to help us win gold medals. Doesn't matter. I don't want him any part of Team Canada. I don't want I don't want him. That's it. And that's easy for me to say as a fan, and it means nothing in the grand scheme of things, but that's just the way I feel. You cannot let this go.
I'm with you 100%. We growing up in rural North Carolina, we used to have a saying on a farm I worked at, and a little bit different version of it. If it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck and it's a duck, then it's a duck.
Yeah.
And you're right. If that's the kind of chirping going on, I mean, can you imagine how Kyle must have felt when his teammates are chirping? It's a big joke to everybody. Management's not going to do anything. Your teammates don't have your back. I mean, how isolated and alone can a person feel? And not only that, but at the time, then the reports are coming out. ESPN, SI, Kyle Beach, is this guy a locker room cancer? Is he a head case? Like, it
They put
certainly
it
looks
on
like a smear
him.
job.
Yeah, they put it on him like he was the issue, like he was the problem. And the whole time, Aldrich, that was part of the power, right? I have control over your future. That's one of the things that he spent a lot of time saying to all of the Black Aces. Look, I can get you in or I can keep you out. That's the type of power I'm wielding. And it's unbelievable. And you were asking, how could I imagine the type of isolation? No, I can't imagine the isolation. It's beyond the scope. It hasn't happened to me. I can't imagine being able to put myself in his situation and to experience that. I can't. And there's people that can because the people have lived through it. And it's terrible. It's terrible.
I don't know that you and I are going to say all the right things, though. I'm sure there will be people who will listen to us and disagree with things, which is fine. I think both you and I are both the type of people who are, we feel the way we feel, but we're willing to learn um, and grow and understand better. And you're right. Like, I have no idea what he's gone through. Like, I'm not going to even pretend to, I can have sympathy and I can try and empathize, but I've never been put in that kind of a position. And I've seen people say, Kyle's a big guy and he's, 6 foot whatever. And he's like, how does, somebody have power over him? And you just hit the nail on the head. Like when you have a coach who's like, I can get you your NHL job or I can keep you in the AHL forever. Like that's a type of power that physical size and being muscular or being strong can't deal with that. I mean, it's a whole nother level of, psychological warfare, that's going on between Aldrich and Beach. I mean,
And that's
it's
exactly what it
ridiculous.
is. That's exactly what it is. Psychological warfare. Because when you look at every one of those Black Aces, every kid coming up in the draft, you think it is their dream to play in the NHL. Their dream. They've lived, breathed, bled. It's their whole life, their whole focus. And to have one person as the quote unquote gatekeeper, even though, look, Aldrich really wasn't the gatekeeper, but he made himself to look like that, to say, you don't have a future unless I say so. What type of, again, it's psychological warfare. It's unbelievable to think of how anyone would be able to deal with that. Never mind all of the sexual harassment and sexual assault issues that came after the fact. You pile that on top as well. I mean, it seems insurmountable. It seems insurmountable. So look, as far as the players go, the Hawks, you know what? We need to point out There were a couple who were on his side. Sopel was one. There was another one, and I'm drawing a blank on his name, and I feel terrible that I'm doing this now, who actually stood up. And Kyle makes a point of addressing them and thanking them in his interview. It's in the interview. There were people stepping up for him. Okay. So there are some there that were trying to do something and address it.
To cut you off, so one of the few bright spots, if you can call it that, Taylor Hall of the Bruins comes out and makes a statement which is 180 degrees from what Kyle Beach's teammates and what they should have responded with. And he says, the Bruins got us together to watch. This is important. We're in this together. They had us watch this together. And Hall says, every culture needs to keep getting better. Hockey's no different. It's a little bit of an old boys club. He goes on about there's some things about secrecy that need to change, and hopefully they can. But ultimately, people need to be held accountable. And I think it's going to be younger players like Hall and their influence that are going to need to be pushing the charge as far as the players go, as far as the NHLPA go, to push for that. Because sometimes people read statements and you can tell that a marketing person wrote this or the lawyers wrote this. And Hall was one of the first people I saw who came out and said something that I said, I believe him. Like, I think he cares. I think he could see, because he and Beach, I think, were in juniors around the same time. And I think that's the kind of mentality where he's like, that could have been me. This needs to change, which is one of a few others have come out now. And there's been some other people who have kind of said and done the right things. You hope that that's coming from the heart, and you hope that's not coming from like I said, a marketing person or a lawyer. Certainly one of the Blackhawks press releases, and I don't remember which one, talked about, making amends and healing. And the last line of the statement was about putting together a team to bring another championship home to Chicago. And I went, a marketing person wrote your apology, because it's right there. In your apology, you talk about putting together a team to win another cup. How tone deaf do you have to be? How can you not read the room and release that statement? And then we have the commissioner, the guy who's supposed to be in charge of the show, who clearly isn't, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Who puts his foot in his mouth repeatedly when talking about no number 2, who Kyle Beach is crying about not having done more to help, even though he himself was powerless at the time. Is the league going to reach out and help him, John Doe number 2? And of course, Bettman puts on his double talk lawyer speak and is like, well, I need to know more. What do you need to know more about? This is a convicted sex offender. We have the Jenner and Block report. It's not a money thing. You could pay for counseling for John Doe number 2 for the rest of his life and not hit 6 figures, and certainly not hit 7 figures. This is about Bettman wanting to cover the league from lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit for that boys will be boys mentality that's going on, because this is the first domino. And if this domino falls, Bettman knows that this could take down the league. And I've said it before. I know other people said it. And every day when something new comes out about this, I say hockey is the best sport and the NHL is the worst league.
Yeah. You talk, it's that fear of admission of guilt, right? He instead of using the moral compass and just doing the right thing and taking care of this young high school student at the time from Michigan who was attacked as a result of the inaction of the team, the league, the NHLPA. But he's gotta put his thing out there. Well, we need more information and all the rest of it. And it that's the way his reaction was. You think about the Blackhawks. You talked about the press release that they put out and how tone deaf they were. Well, talk is talk, and press releases are just that, but their actions mean something different. Their lawyers are made a request to Kyle Beach and his lawyers to say, let's put this off to get a mediator and talk about the settlement. When we're going to talk about the settlement, let's put this off for 2 months.
I hope Kyle takes them for every nickel they got. I'll be
and
honest with
I
you.
do too. I frankly,
If
I
he
do
bankrupts
too.
the league, I'll be okay.
You
I'll
know
get by.
what? The torture that he has endured, he deserves. Um, they deserve a comeuppance more than anything, and I don't know if that's the right word. There's a lot. Everything it jumbles in my head. I'm trying to find the right tone to put on this. I want him to receive what he deserves. And look, it's very easy to crunch the numbers. He was an 11th round pick. You take a look, an average of how the 11th round picks do over time, you can find out what the settlement would be at. You don't need to wait for 2 months. You don't need a mediator. Get it done. Fix it.
Own your mistakes.
You've been exactly own your mistakes. You've been waiting for 11 years. It's out now. Fix it. Step up and do the right thing and don't push it off any further. Take some ownership. And look, you mentioned earlier how the players are all like some of the players like Taylor Hall and around the league, they're all talking and stuff. They've actually agreed and voted for a further investigation to see if the NHLPA should have done more. It's going to target and zone in on the NHLPA. Now, look, that's going to be difficult for Kyle. Kyle's lived through hell. He put his name out there, and as a part of the investigation of the Jenner and Block report. Now he's going to have to redo it all over again. He's ready to do it. He said as much, but they're going to find out whether Donald Fair and the NHLPA what their responsibility is for this, because they're to everyone's knowledge, you can ask around, and it's been asked by others before. Is there a sexual conduct file rule in the league? Is there one at all? There doesn't appear to be one. There doesn't appear to be one. And that needs to be addressed. That needs to be addressed along
It,
with a bunch of other things. And you don't just shoot, shovel, and shut up, which is another colloquial phrase that people use to describe what's been going on. You got to look into it. And I hope they do, but they've got to address it. Now, we've spent a lot of time talking about what is going on in the league, how everyone's handling this. People are, our listeners now well aware of our stance of what should happen. Is there, Brad, anything we, the fans, can do? I mean, you and I are talking about this in the hopes that people are listening, that people will actually read the report, listen to the interview, make themselves more aware of what's going on. That's one thing that we can do. Is there anything else, do you think, that we, the fans, can do as it regards this?
I think, once again, going back to the fact that Bettman works for the owners, the only thing the owners understand is money.
Yeah.
I said on our Twitter account the other day, and I was going to repeat it here on the broadcast. I had planned to buy a couple of Hurricanes jerseys for Christmas presents, for example, things like that. My son has switched his allegiances from the Bruins to the Hurricanes, which makes me happy. He's got one jersey, but he's got a couple favorite players who's looking for him. I'm not spending another dime on the league. I'm not buying a jersey. I'm not buying a ticket. I'm not buying an NHL Center Ice. I'm not doing any of those things until the NHL starts to show real change. And it's the only power we as fans have is to hurt them in the pocketbooks. I would love, and I don't think that we could. I think we're small enough potatoes. We couldn't make this happen. But if there's anybody listening who, has a bigger social media presence and can get on it, if we could pick a day, one Saturday afternoon, and just get fans to not go to a game. Let every game on some random Saturday have 1,000 people in attendance or less. And the owners will take notice and they will take action because it's the only thing that we have. I mean, I understand, maybe you lose 50 or $100 in tickets. I'm willing to do that. I think this is the type of thing that's important enough. So I'm not spending another nickel and until the league shows real change. I don't know what else we can do other than continue to promote and support people like Kyle Beach who have these issues. The next player who steps forward who says something XYZ happened to me, believe them.
Mm-hmm.
Don't say, well, I want proof. Believe them. Okay. They're not just making this up. Support them. And I'm going to find other areas. I've really started to get into Premier Hockey. Used to be the NWHL. We have a team here in Boston, the Boston Pride. I've started following their games. I love hockey. I'm not going to give up on hockey, but I'm not going to necessarily support the NHL. I love the Hurricanes, but I'm not going to put money in his pocket as long as he's an owner who has the power to fire people like Gary Bettman and make real change and affect real change. I want to see a statement from him. This is what I believe. This is important to me. I'm going to work on other people to make it happen. I want to see every owner in the league own up to what's happened. We understand that you personally were not involved, but stop worrying about your checkbooks. Stop worrying about your legal culpability for things and just do the right thing. Be a reasonable, decent human being and do the right thing and start affecting some change. And that's the only power that we really have as fans. So every time the NHL tweets out something, for the most part, I respond and ask them, that's great that, Brady Shea got an OT goal that didn't count last night, and then Marty Nate just wins it for the Canes. That's great. What are you doing about the Blackhawks?
Yeah.
I mean, going so far as to say, and I think this was news to you when I talked. So first of all, Rick Westhead, to start wrapping things up, has done an amazing job breaking the story and really getting as much information out there. And he's doing it in kind of that old style, journalistic style of, here's all the information you pour through. You can read, the Jenner and Block report. You can see the interview, with the words coming out of Kyle's mouth. You decide what you believe. I'm not writing a slant for you. This is what's going on. And yesterday, after having said, well, we may or may not support John Doe 2 in terms of counseling the thing, yesterday, the league comes out and says, we're not going to do anything about it. We're going to turn it over to the Blackhawks and let the Blackhawks handle it. Think about that. The team that's covered this up for 10 years, who had people in the room going, I'm just the low man on the totem pole in the room. I was new. It wasn't my responsibility to do it, so I just did nothing. They're going to let them handle it.
And they've already stated that they want to push off the settlement. So how quickly do you think that response is? How quickly do you think that the Hawks and that organization is going to step up and help this young man?
Exactly. I wouldn't let them handle a Fisher-Price car at my house. I wouldn't trust them with anything. And I feel bad for the day in, day out, low-level employees of the Blackhawks, because those people have got to have trouble going to work now. I hope that they're getting the support they need in terms of counseling things from human resources. Because if you're a low-level Joe Schmo Blackhawks employee and you're having to deal with this and you weren't even there when all this happened, my heart goes out to you too, because Lord knows what you're going through.
I can't even. Again, that's another aspect that you can't imagine, the turmoil and the after effects of what has occurred and what it does now. At what point, how long does this hang on the Hawks? We don't know. I mean, it may last for a very, very long time, both for on the ice and as an organization. And how do you make the proper steps to fixing it? We don't know. Very quickly, I'll throw in, if you look at Anaheim, Bob Murray now under investigation for misbehavior in the league. So we look at the Ducks. The Ducks are maybe looking at what happened in Chicago and saying, okay, we've got a situation of our own around here. We're going to take this aggressively and deal with it. Bob Murray is out. We don't know if he's out forever.
He resigned. An hour ago, it came out that he resigned.
There you go. So it did break.
He is also enrolled in an alcohol abuse program, according to ESPN, as of just over an hour and 10 minutes ago.
There you go. Okay, so there you have it. I mean, they're being aggressive and they're stepping forward and dealing with things as they need to, just like that, right? So that's the type of response that you want. That's how you want teams to handle their own backyard. If there's weeds to pull, take care of it. Whatever you have to do, fix your own backyard, take care of yourself, and everyone will benefit. And that's what needed to be done. That's what we hope to see from now on. It's now up to every organization. Every organization, and we talk about this as what we want from our players on the ice. We want them all pulling on the rope in the same direction. That's what we want now from the executive, from each and every team. Everyone pulling on the rope in the same direction to make sure that these sort of things never happen again, that they are addressed immediately, that the players feel safe, that they are able to play the game that they are so incredibly talented at their highest level without fear of harassment, without fear of misconduct of any nature from anyone in power or above them. Let them shine, but do it in a healthy way. That's what we want. That's what we want. Um, I can't think of anything else to say at this moment about this topic. I'm hoping for the best. I'm hoping for the best.
Don't always have the right words. Sometimes trying to get the point across and cover. I mean, when we could talk about this for hours, and we're trying to do it in 30-ish minutes. If you're a fan of hockey, if you're a decent human being, that's probably why you're listening to the podcast. We've always kind of said this. We stand for hockey's for everybody. There are a lot of people, I'm sure, they're like, yeah, those guys, whatever. I'm old school hockey and hardcore, and there are people that probably aren't bothered by the situation nearly as much as they should be. But that's not me. I'm still upset about it. I'm angry and sad and just generally emotional about it because it's just horrific. And I said earlier, Kyle Beach is the focal point for anyone, and this happens every day, not just here in the States, but in Canada, all over the world, to men and women. If you need help, we're going to put up links with the podcast, people you can call, places you can turn to. You're not alone. There has been an outswelling of support for Kyle Beach. I hope that continues. I think he needs it and deserves it. With John Doe 2 being so young, I hope John Doe 2 stays John Doe 2 and can live as normal of a life as they can. Know that we are also here for you, whomever you are. It's so insane that this is the kind of thing we have to talk about in 2021 that it's just hard to put into words. It is the best way, but
it is hard to put into words, no question. But look, we're thankful for the opportunity to take this on. Like you said, Brad, it's difficult to come up with the right words. It's difficult to encapsulate all of this and bring this all together. I guess the one thing that we can say right now is thank you for listening. And just a reminder, if you need help, there's help out there for you. I'm going to repeat that for you, Brad. You brought it up first, but I'm bringing it home and echoing it because it's important. There is help out there. We'll point you in the directions where you can get help. And let's hope this is the last time you and I ever have to take on a topic of this nature as it refers to hockey, as it refers to sports, as it refers to humanity. And I know that's a Pollyanna statement on my part to dream big of a perfect world where we can just talk hockey on a podcast about hockey instead of these types of topics. But there it is. Thank you for listening. And
I think we just say good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Ray and I greatly appreciate your support in helping us produce an informative and fun podcast. As always, we'd like to say that we believe hockey is for everyone. Whether you're a Caniac or a bunch of jerks, doesn't matter, as we're just a couple of jerks anyway. We would love to hear your questions, comments, and suggestions. We will do our best to answer anything hockey related. You can reach us via email at stormcellar97@gmail.com. On Twitter, we are at stormcellar97, and on Facebook at facebook.com/stormcellar97.